At Vapor Central on Yonge Street, patrons inhale and puff marijuana with no sense of inhibition or prohibition.
Here we pretty much provide an environment where it's like weed was legal. We treat it as if it was.
Yes.
But their fight to legalize the drug has now been ignited, now that the Center for Addiction and Mental Health is calling for legalization.
I think it's great news. I think it's a sign of the times.
I think that's great. It's a huge step forward.
If marijuana is successfully legalized in Canada, CAMH says it should be sold and regulated like alcohol, a proposed system this law expert says has been a long time coming.
It's clear that the so-called war against drugs has not been successful. Not only has it failed, but it's been counterproductive in that it's generated a criminal culture, much as alcohol prohibition did in the 1930s.
The proposed legalization would come with strict regulation about consumption and availability. Law experts say policymakers could look to Washington or Colorado, where marijuana is already legal. But unlike Colorado, CAMH proposes a much more strict system that would regulate potency and restrict sale to adults. Purchasing marijuana through legal channels would also mean taxes similar to alcohol and cigarettes.
Marijuana is not completely safe, but nor is alcohol or tobacco. But we have regulated suppliers.
Last year, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police voted in favor of making pot possession a finable offense, which could help free up the court system.
We still have to consider regulation in order to keep that drug out of the hands of children and to make sure that organized crime does not profit from its trafficking.
That's a hopeful prospect for medicinal marijuana users. At the Get Melted Cafe and Vapor Lounge, legalization would mean less stigma.
It's just one more arrow pointing in the obvious direction.
Marianne Domain, Global News.
Should we legalize marijuana? A loud yes today from one of our most prestigious institutions that helps people with mental health and addiction issues. Live to Shauna Hunt with why CAMH is pushing so hard to regulate pot. Shauna.
Well, hey, Gordon, we are live here at Yonge Dundas Square. Now, this has been the site of many massive pro-pot rallies over the years. I know CAMH estimates that 40% of Canadians smoked a joint in the last year alone and says the best way to keep users safe is to legalize pot and control the distribution.
It's not taboo at all. Like I find growing up in Toronto, I think it was just everywhere, right?
The Center for Addiction and Mental Health is now joining the chorus to legalize cannabis, calling it a tactic in the war on drugs.
I think the greatest danger overall is there's no control who gets it. There's no control over the potency.
CAMH says smoking pot can be harmful to your health, especially on adolescent brains that are still developing. But Dr. Jürgen Rehm, who is part of the research team, believes regulating pot with tight reins, such as an age restriction, will make it harder for teens to get their hands on it.
A huge percentage of our current youth is in contact with drug dealers. If pot is legal, this would fall away.
High schoolers who want to buy pot, if they're not legal to buy it, they're not legal age, they would still go to a drug dealer on the street to buy the pot.
I doubt that. It is probably much easier for them to go with older friends and other people.
According to CAMH, the sale of weed would be controlled by the government just like alcohol at the LCBO, but there would be no flashy commercials or advertising like this, and the packaging would be very plain. Unlike the cannabis craze that took over Colorado last year, days after weed was legalized in that state, billboards went up and pot shops began battling for business. Today, Police Chief Bill Blair said his mind is open to all possibilities.
I think the recognition in that document that we still have to consider regulation in order to keep that drug out of the hands of children, and to make sure that organized crime does not profit from its trafficking are very important discussions.
On city streets where it's not uncommon to get a whiff of the green stuff, some are dubious of the new endorsement.
You can be intoxicated on marijuana just like you could be on alcohol, and how do we control like who's driving on it and that?
At this downtown vapor bar that operates on the edge of marijuana laws, habitual smokers like Dave welcome the support.
I think it's a big sign of the times for sure. I think the writing's on the wall that legalization is imminent now if an organization like CAMH is behind it. look, whether you like weed or whether you're against it, people are going to be smoking it anyway. And as long as they are, why not tax it? Why not regulate it? Why not make it safer and then make some tax money off it as well?
All right, so if we do end up legalizing pot here in the country, CAMH says that there would have to be some sort of education blitz letting people know the dangers of marijuana use. The institution is also hoping that this will spark a more serious conversation with the federal government. If you'd like to see a list of all the countries that have legalized pot, head to citynews.ca. Live at Young Dundas Square, I'm Shauna Hunt. Gord, I'll throw it back to you.
The long, dragged-out battle for the legalization of marijuana now has the support of one of Canada's leading centres for the treatment of addiction.
Do you think Canadian society is evolved to the point where they're ready to accept this?
I think they're ready to discuss it.
The Centre for Addiction and Mental Health recommends Canada take marijuana out of the criminal code, but unlike Colorado, stringently regulate its sale, controlling its potency and restricting it to adults.
And this will lead to overall less use and less problems.
The idea won surprising support from Toronto's police chief.
The laws are not made by the police, they're enforced by the police, but I'm very encouraged by that public health approach that advocated by CAMH and by a recognition that the regulation of cannabis is also has value in public policy.
It's now also on the federal political agenda, given the position taken by Liberal leader Justin Trudeau.
I'm actually not in favor of decriminalizing cannabis. I'm in favor of legalizing it.
While the Harper government remains adamantly opposed to legalization, even its position is evolving. The Justice Minister has sent out signals that he's ready to listen to an idea from the Police Chiefs Association, an idea that would see possession downgraded to an offence punishable by a ticket.
Options that would give police the ability, much like the treatment of open liquor.
Now the argument is that legalization could have public health benefits. Marijuana use has been linked to cancer, to addiction, and to impaired driving. Better to have it legal, say proponents, so that its problems can be openly treated.
It's about time that Canada took a good look at its drug policies. The war on drugs has failed miserably. It does a lot more damage than it does good.
The criminalization of pot hasn't worked in stopping Canadians from smoking. Roughly 4 in 10 of us have tried it at one point in our lives, one of the highest rates of cannabis use in the world. Sean Mallon, Global News.